After seeing all these new 5-year deals dropping for these NBA players and wondering where my 5-year deal is in the NBA, I can't even get a 10-day contract.
If you could shoot like Lauri Markkanen, then maybe you'd get a 5-year deal.
I just watched you play a little bit of Pop-A-Shot. I don't think that 5 years coming, Devon.
Well, I did ask for a 10-day or that final roster spot for Daryl Morey's team, but no one has come calling yet. So here we are on the PHLY Sixers podcast with Derek Bodner, Kyle Neubeck. I'm Devon Givens. 10-day contract less is for me and Brianna here, of course. As always, you in the chat as we start things off on this Wednesday, discussing some Sixers-related way of incorporating Lauri Markkanen, because a lot of people out there in the Sixers world wanted Lauri Markkanen to become a Philadelphia 76ers, kept hope alive even with Paul George now in the mix. I don't know how, but you kept hope alive. Well, he's not going to go to State. He's not going to any other team because he's staying now with the Utah Jazz with a 5-year, $230+ million deal to lock in with the Jazz for 5 years, unless he's traded at some point. But he's now off the market where all of the Sixer
he can't get traded this year, baby.
At least not for 6 months. And the Sixer fans cannot talk about it for that length of time.
Well,
no, he's not getting traded this year.
6 months puts
That's
him to the day after the trade deadline.
That was the whole point of pushing
it is
until
the day
this
after
date.
the trade. Okay, I got you.
So
all right, well, there we go.
The dream is dead.
The dream is gone for the 24-25 campaign. He's out. So who's next? Who is next? Kyle, 5 years, $238 million deal, according to Adrian Wojnarowski.
I think it's 220 in like new money, essentially, on top of what already existed.
And
how it was reported.
That's $24 million coming into this year. So he's being bumped up to like $42 million for this year's salary. And then that's like a 4-year, $196 million after this upcoming season. So it's a little under his max. The way you get him to agree to take less than his max and be like, hey, we'll give you $24 million so
immediately
a little bit of a discount on the next 4 years.
Surprised by that?
No, I think once the Jazz didn't use their cap space on external free agents, I think this was the most likely outcome. The only thing that could have gotten in the way of it is if they did trade him. And it seemed like you were going to have to completely blow Danny Ainge away in order for that to happen. But no, once they didn't use their cap space, because there is all kinds of, there's a salary cap floor, which they weren't at before they gave Markkanen this extra $24 million. And if you don't hit that floor by the start of the regular season, you don't get luxury tax reimbursement payments. So it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that once they didn't use their cap space on free agency, this was going to happen.
And in a quick statement to ESPN, Markkanen said, they've all showed their belief in me, from the ownership to the front office to Will. That's Will Hardy, the head coach. Markkanen told ESPN it's a comfortable environment, and those guys' resumes speak for themselves. I trust in the organization to help me grow as a person and as a player, to build our team, and I'm ready to take on that challenge. And they've put some pieces around them, Kyle. They're still not ready to win in the Western Conference, but they surprised a lot of people, including what he did in year one, which is now 2 seasons ago. First-time All-Star, being traded from Cleveland in that deal to send him to Utah for Donovan Mitchell. And a lot of people have lost hope in the type of player that he could be. No one thought, I think, speaking for the most part, I don't think many people believe that he would be the face of a franchise, even though they are still rebuilding. But a piece where a lot of people were calling, including Sixer fans, wanting their team to call and find out the availability.
In our Twitter mentions, I'll say by name, our fan of the show, Jamie Fretz.
Yes.
We appreciate you.
Has been dying for a Markkanen trade and Markkanen trade discussion for months and months and months.
And
I know he has tweeted at us several times today. I checked before the show because, in the offseason, I'm not checking Twitter a whole heck of a lot, but I saw Jamie was pouring one out proverbially for the Markkanen dream. But yeah, to your point, Devon,
he wanted the show. He got it.
When Markkanen left Chicago, I think there were a lot of people that were like, this guy, not what we thought he would be coming into the league. He proved a lot of people wrong in Cleveland, right? Like, I was super skeptical of the team construction there, similar to how I'm critical of it now and skeptical of it now. Markkanen was playing like small forward for a lot of minutes in Cleveland and still managed to hold up at least okay defensively and really showed you what he could do as a shooter while he was in Cleveland. And so while I didn't think he would be as good as he is in Utah over the last 2 years when he left Cleveland, I was more optimistic on his future. Just figured it would take maybe another move or maybe other guys come into Utah. You find like the real star, but he's been really, really good. I mean, they've played, I don't think they've been like playoff caliber when he plays, but I think they're like right below that. They're like in that when he's on the floor, I think Utah's been right around like a play-in or maybe right below the play-in level type of team. So that's the interesting part about this to me is I figured number one prospect next year is like this big time, well-known white kid, right? You got the Mormon fan base in Utah. You have the state of Utah. Like, man, it's a Danny Ainge is looking at this guy. It's got to be his guy, right? And then he locks up Markkanen. And so I don't think they would have to shut Markkanen down or Markkanen would have to get hurt for them to be at the top of that tanking race for Cooper Flag this year. They did flatten the odds, so it'll make it a little easier to be decent without being completely out of reach of the number one pick. But I guess they ultimately decided, he's going to be tradable on any sort of deal. He's a very good player. Those are tough to acquire in Utah without drafting them. Sign him to it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I think as long as he has positive trade value going forward, and I think one thing that doing the renegotiation and extend, like I said, it lowers his cap hold, cap hit, not a large amount, but at least a little bit in future years. And I think one of the things with this new CBA, like for some teams, a $5 million decrease in the cap hit could be a huge deal if they want to stay under that second apron or whatnot. So I think using that cap space they have now to get that a little bit below market contract makes sense for them, not only for themselves, but also for Markkanen as a trade chip. Maybe they might use some of those draft picks in the future. Obviously not this year because he can't be traded, but at next year, time of the draft, next offseason, a year from now, who knows? But by getting him his salary a little bit lower, it does help his trade value. But yeah, I mean, it's I'm not entirely sure which direction they pivot. I do think it made sense for them to be in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, but I also think they can't now. I think like Kyle mentioned, a lot of your odds are flattened. I don't expect them to be one of the worst 5 or 6 teams in the league.
No.
But we've seen teams deep in the lottery move up the last couple of years. It's not a great chance, but I guess
this year the lottery was complete anarchy. Yeah. So that's an example of how much things have changed, right? Where when the Sixers were really bad, if they were the worst team, the worst they could fall to was what, 4?
Yeah.
And you had a pretty strong chance to be in that top 3. Now all the odds are lower, and there's a little bit of room for anarchy on lottery night. So I'm sure that factored into it.
Bottom 8 for the Jazz this year, and we'll see where they go for next season as Lauri Markkanen is not locked in. So with his name now off the board, all the Golden State talk can quiet down. Of course, the Sixers talk quieted down quite a bit ago. And here we are now asking the question, well, who's the next big name? Who's the next star, all-star that could potentially be on the move? Because even when you have a trio of Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid, you're always going to still have your eyes wandering
the roster's never settled,
exactly.
Baby.
Who's that next one that can still fit within, but even looking a little without logic of just saying, I want this player on my team. Who is that next player? So, Kyle, if I would ask you now that Lauri Markkanen is off the board, we put it up there of who's next. Who would you say to start off will be the next big name that would be on the move in the NBA as we get ready for the start of the 24-25 season?
So this is not a Sixers target, to be clear.
I think it's probably worth noting most of the big names aren't going to be Sixers targets because they can't match salary for that. You're probably looking more for I don't want to say role player, but somebody that's role player.
The Dorian Finney-Smith types that we were talking about in the offseason.
Or best case scenario, maybe somebody on a rookie scale contract who's going to be doing extension, but that could fit into that sort of like walking trade exception.
And I have some guys that we'll get to on that front. I think the most obvious one to me is Trae Young in Atlanta, seeing kind of where they end up after jumping up. Again, we were just talking about the lottery. They made a big jump in the lottery. They traded DeJounte Murray to recoup some draft capital after moving a bunch to get him. And that experiment mostly failed, the Trae Young, DeJounte Murray partnership. And they are a team that has no real direction to me. Like it's a youth movement, but it's not because they have Trae. So they'll be, look, if Trae Young is healthy and on the floor, they'll be maybe not elite offense because of the other pieces aren't there yet, but they have a high floor as an offense. He's going to give you 28, 30 points a game, 10 assists a night. He's going to make life easier for the guys who cannot create for themselves. I know they're moving on or want to move on from the Capella era and feature Okongwu more, right? Like that's what we heard a lot of last year, certainly.
Yep.
After him getting more experience, that'll be more pronounced now. I expect him to start and play most of the games as long as he's healthy. And I just feel like having moved Murray, if they don't start well, if Trey is just disgruntled and I'm on a team with a bunch of guys who are either not good enough or too young to really impact the team. Like I really like Jalen Johnson, but he's not a guy that's like a every single night produce type of player quite yet. Mm-hmm. Maybe he makes that leap this year, but if he doesn't, I don't really see where their immediate upside comes from. And I think in that case, Trey is going to look elsewhere. Trey has a powerful agent and agency behind him. And there are a lot of teams that we've heard kind of tenuously connected to him, right? You've heard the Lakers at times. The Spurs are a natural candidate to trade for. I know they have Chris Paul as like he's kind of the short-term caretaker guy to make Wemby's life easier.
But he's on a 1-year deal.
Right.
Yes.
And that's more like, hey, we put some veteran stability around Wembanyama because he already is so good and so few guys passed him the ball last year that it's just like, get somebody who will throw this guy the ball. So I've talked a lot about how much I love that fit. Trae Young, a different sort of player, certainly, than Chris Paul, but would be that long-term. He's more prime age to go with Wemby, who will be in his early to mid-20s for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And you give him a guy who's experienced, who's been in high-level playoff games. I don't love Trae base level, but also Wemby might be the best guy to pair with him defensively in the entire league because he can clean up not all of Trae's problems, but a lot of them.
Guy Funny was calling the guy the traffic cone the other night. Trae Young
the moving cone.
Trae Young is the moving traffic cone in the NBA, to your point. So he would be an ideal fit. And look, the one thing that you talk about, the one thing that you will not say about Trae Young, as many shots as he get off, he will pass the basketball.
He will.
He will lead the league.
He'll dominate the ball,
yes.
And he'll use it a lot. But he spreads it around.
Yes,
and
he does.
He's a high level playmaker. Like
yes, he is.
Really, really has been a high level playmaker dating back to his amateur days. So if you can put someone like that with Wemby, throwing him lobs, throwing him entries, finding him in his spots, above the break on threes, running pick and pops, like that's a ideal long-term fit to me. So I'll be keeping a close eye on that, but just keeping a close eye on the Hawks in general because they feel ripe they're in the middle stage, right? They started tearing down a little bit, but Trae keeps them at this level. You could just knock that floor out and start a new house at this point.
And I think like there's some question of, well, does Trae Young just get sick of it and ask out? There's still a lot of questions of how committed Atlanta is to Trae Young. I think a lot of people assume that when they traded DeJounte that, all right, well, they're building, they've fixed that situation and they're building with their guard. I'm not sure they're necessarily committed. I think it's probably a lot more like, well, they weren't like Trae Young's value is so low and so depressed that it made no sense to trade him now. Well, let's give him maybe a team where he has the ball a little bit more. You don't have that, fight with the backcourt and sharing the ball, and maybe he can put up some better numbers or look a little better, rehab his value a little bit. I'm not sure that necessarily means if his value does bump back up a little bit, maybe not to where it was 2 or 3 years ago, but at least somewhere in the middle. If they, the Hawks themselves are like, all right, well, let's move on. Let's, build through the draft and see what we can get.
Yeah, the number 1 overall pick, Jalen Johnson, you mentioned already. And then there could be others outside of Trae Young where they would just start tearing down that roster a little bit more and getting on the move.
And so that's the big one, right? So to tie it back to the Sixers, Trae Young being moved, just him individually will have no impact on the Sixers because they're not trading for him. Doesn't make sense here, et cetera, et cetera. If Trae Young gets moved, that creates a potential domino effect where you say, hey, is Bogdan Bogdanović available? Because that's not a guy you generally keep on. If you're going full rebuild, that guy becomes a huge trade chip. He becomes
you
like
don't want to have him sitting there rotting on the
yes, and
you get something for him.
He to me is, if you're the Sixers, that's a final piece type of guy at the deadline, right? Because we talked a lot about Bogdanovich last year as a trade target, and he checks a lot of boxes to me. Can play on or off the ball, is comfortable coming off of the bench. Where think of a scenario where we go through most of this year and maybe Eric Gordon is one of your top 7 guys to start the year. You turn Eric Gordon into Bogdanovich, who's a much more lively off the dribble player at this point. I'm a lot more enthusiastic about him as like the 6th man ball handler, the guy you're pairing with the Maxis of the world. Playing in it, imagine a lineup that's like Maxi, Bogdanovich, George, Caleb Martin, and your backup center. That gives you a real chance to not just stay afloat. You're winning minutes in the playoffs without Joel Embiid. You're winning minutes in the regular season without him. Like, that gives you real firepower.
Yep.
And you have some defensive steel on the wing to help account for those guys in the backcourt. And so that would be where I would have my eye if I'm the Sixers. If you start hearing, hey, Trey's available from the Hawks, you got to start making calls on Bogdanovich. I'm not a big DeAndre Hunter guy, but I would at least, I'd keep my ear open on him as well. Just like a toolsy wing that can do a few things. Maybe you change the environment, scale down his role. He makes a little more sense here. But the Hawks, to me, are a big domino team for the whole league because there will be a lot of sellers among bad teams at the deadline. Not a lot of them have as many guys that I think are like legit rotation players, right? Maybe you'll get a fringe guy. The Hawks have at least a couple guys that I think can really impact playoff rotation.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we get closer to Trey being moved by December, January, they are a team that the Sixers should be on the phone with them pretty constantly.
Yeah.
And I know they have some relationships down there, so they'll be talking.
Part of the concern there is if you take back more salary in a trade than you send out, you become hard capped at that first apron. Sixers are really close to that. So obviously you've got KJ and the $8 million or whatever he makes, but getting to that $17 million would be a little bit difficult. You'd probably have to include like Kelly in that deal. You might have to then include Jared McCain in that deal, just make sure you're over that 17. But certainly he was, when we started talking about this topic for the show, he was on the short list just because of what you mentioned. He fits the Sixers. He's somewhere close to that salary range. And if Trae Young is moved, you would expect then a subsequent deal.
Year 2 of a 4-year deal with the Atlanta Hawks in the final year.
Good value, too.
A club option.
And I think it's declining, too. So it's like 17 this year, but it keeps going down.
17, 16 in the final 2 years. When we come back, we'll get Derek's name that he wants to throw out there as a potential guy that could be on the move now that Lauri Markkanen is off the board. May it impact the Sixers like the Atlanta Hawks. Domino effect from Trae Young, as Kyle brought up. We'll get Derek's on the other side here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.
First up, we want to make sure we tell you about Rite Aid, specifically LO Market. When I got to the studio today, I was just searching for something to eat because I completely missed lunch.
He forgot to eat a basketball.
Yeah,
so
I did not eat a basketball.
For some real food.
I did not have to eat a basketball. I want to be clear on that one. Or wait, no, was it a shoe? I forget. It doesn't matter. Anyway, back to Rite Aid. The snack that I was searching for, completely off my game now. The snack that I was searching for, or the snack that I settled on, was not LO Market. But that's only because when they dropped off a goodie box here, we devoured that stuff in minutes. Like,
because we're animals. We ate it way too fast.
Especially when you put something sour or gummy in front of me, we devoured it. The LO Market line includes candy, snacks, and pantry items exclusively at Rite Aid. Products include candy, which we were just talking about, from classic peach rings and Starlight Mints to gummy butterflies and sour worms. They all have all kinds of nuts and trail mixes packed with vitamins, minerals, healthy fats, fiber, and protein. There's popcorn, beef jerky, granola, pantry staples like honey and seasoning, all kinds of stuff at Rite Aid with LO Market. Snack Attack, get LO Market delivered same day or buy online or pick up in store. Go to riteaid.com/shop to order.
Well, guys, Ryan Reynolds is in the news right now, right? He's part of a big movie that just came out. Mr. Deadpool himself. A lot of people seem to be enjoying it after a Marvel dry spell, so to speak. And guess what? He's a man of many talents. He told us about Mint Mobile, said, guys, our plans at Mint Mobile are $15 a month when you purchase the 3-month plan. I said, Ryan, that sounds like nonsense. He says, it's not nonsense. And here's why. Mint Mobile secret sauce is that they sell wireless service online, no retail stores, no salespeople. They just deliver premium phone plans directly to you. So say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. You, just like me, you can have a burner phone. If you want a second phone, you have a personal phone, a work phone, however you want to use it. I ended up getting a second plan because it's so cheap and because they told me, hey, look, Kyle, if you sign up with Mint Mobile, you get high-speed data, unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network. That's on every single plan that they offer. And what's even better, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan. You bring your phone number. You could start a new phone number like I did, and you bring all your existing contacts, all your information. It's set up in a really short amount of time. I think I was done the whole process within 15 minutes, if I had to guess. It was incredible. I've been using it every day in the month since. So you guys can ditch your overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's limited time deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/Sixers. That's mintmobile.com/Sixers. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Sixers. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And I will say, I know a lot of you are watching on whether it's second screens, phones, iPads, what have you. So your service for your data is very important, not just your phone service. I've had an excellent experience with Mint Mobile with their data plans. So something to keep in mind there as well.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Ryan Reynolds, as you said, is in the news big time right now.
Shout out Ryan Reynolds.
Big time in the news at the moment. All right, man. Well, if your double phones are ringing and you're reaching out to these GMs and talking to some agents and all, who is that player that you have your eyes focused on?
Derek Dumars down there.
Well, I think wasn't too thrilled with his tenure, so I'm not going to accept that. I think the other obvious name, and this is like Kyle started off with a name that doesn't make sense for the Sixers, but could, multi-team deals or whatnot. What the hell's going on with Brandon Ingram?
Yep.
Like that seems like something that has to get resolved. They clearly don't want to pay him. He's wants a contract that I think is probably going to be terrifying, which was one of the things we brought up in June when we were bringing up options, even though he made sense in other areas. And we probably talked ourselves into his game translating maybe a little better than our first instinct. That contract, especially if he's wanting that anywhere close to a max, is going to be a really bad contract. And the Pelicans aren't going to give it to him. So something has to happen there. And again, the Sixers right now don't have enough matching salary to trade for him. He's not an option for the Sixers, but there are just so many trickle-down effects, whether that's other people on the Pelicans, whether that's a multi-team trade, that could impact the Sixers in some way. I don't know of a meaningful way to say how that would impact the Sixers because you don't know the teams that's going to be involved in that trade. But he just feels like someone that, like, if he's not moved in the next, how many months do we have until February here? If he's not moved in the next 6 months, I would be stunned.
Yeah, I just don't see anybody else on that roster that would be available for the Sixers. CJ McCollum, no. And then you would look at Herb Jones. Everyone wants to bring him up, but if they're moving Brandon Ingram, wouldn't they want to keep Herb Jones with Trey Murphy as two of their younger pieces to go with? Of course, Zion Williamson. You don't move Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. You keep them as two cornerstone pieces, especially when we talk about so many wings in the West Coast that he has to defend and try to slow down as a player that we know has already been an all-NBA defender in his short time in the league. So when I look at their roster outside of those and even going to the bench, Najee Marshall now gone, there aren't many others from their particular roster that you would look at. But we talked a ton about Brandon Ingram, whether talking ourselves into it or not. It was a real conversation because they're going in a different direction. They have to pay Trey Murphy. They have to give him those minutes to warrant whatever contract they give him. Brandon Ingram is going to be in the way. And they clearly have shown that they feel like, and maybe even with him, that he feels like it just does not work with Zion Williamson on the floor. The only problem, though, Kyle, is Zion Williamson is not always on the floor. So they're going to get rid of their second best player, and the guy can't stay on the floor.
So to your point, the tough part with the Pelicans, unlike the Hawks, is that they feel like they've already gone toward this is our next iteration of the team. You get DeJounte to be the head of the snake as the perimeter ball handler. You have a couple of young wings that I think are very good players. Herb Jones, not a great shooter, but is an unbelievable defender. Trey Murphy looks like he can be that two-way guy, right? We'll see as he gets a bigger role what he can grow into. You have Zion. He's great when he can play. The whole thing is being able to play. And Ingram just doesn't really fit with that, but they're at an impasse where it's like, where does he go? Where does he fit? Does a team want to take the swing on him? Because we talked at length about Brandon Ingram, where I fall somewhere in the middle on him, where I don't think he's this, terrible player. I don't think he's someone you should just completely give up on, but he's also someone that has stopped shooting threes as much, that needs the ball in his hands. And so if you're a winning team and you're looking for another piece, like the Warriors, for example, the Warriors were the team that was most connected to Markkanen throughout these trade talks. They were heavily in on him. If you're the Warriors, you don't really want to bring in a Brandon Ingram, where the benefit of Markkanen is he just steps in and he fits into a role and does what we do to some extent. Brandon Ingram would be marching to his own drum within that team and breaking up some of what has made them very good. Now, maybe they do need a change, right? Because Klay Thompson's gone. They're going to have to change their identity regardless. And maybe you just need shot creation and you figure it out from there. But if the Warriors are off the board, and a lot of these other good teams have already formed their core, they have their nucleus. So who wants to take the gamble on him? And I don't know who that is. My guess at the end of the day is he ends up getting flipped for a similar type of player. I'm not saying Zach LaVine specifically, but another one of those guys, right? That's a talent that people are down on. Yeah. And two teams just say, we'll do a 1-for-1 change of environment type of trade and say, we'll bet on this talent improving here and our guy that we have maybe looking worse at the other spot. But I don't see any natural suitors for him at this point.
No, because as you say that, I'm thinking about some of these teams and I'm like, where is he going to go? I just don't see a spot for him of where he's actually going to end up and for it to make sense. It's just not there.
Now, you get to the deadline, it might be different, right? Because there will be some desperate teams. Exactly. Yeah. So if you look at it less from a long-term build perspective and more of we just need something, right? Like we're behind where our expectations are. We need an injection of talent. Somebody will say at the deadline, we'll flip a couple of expirings or whatever we need to. We'll bring in Ingram, maybe pay a first for him, and just hope that the talent is enough. Like, that's fine. I just don't see who wants to be in the long-term Brandon Ingram business.
No, on the other side of that, if they feel like they're a playoff team that's missing a piece and he is the next best and he's showing in the first half of the season that he's actually playing like the all-star Brandon Ingram that he was a few seasons ago, that Team X would take a chance on him and say, we can use that scoring punch right now. We'll worry about the rest later. But if he can help get us over the hump, get that scoring ability in the postseason, then they take a shot and they take a swing and don't worry about it and don't look back and see if it works out. You brought up the other name. That's the obvious one, and that is the Chicago Bulls. Maybe that is the spot for Brandon Ingram, but Zach LaVine, as you said, what the hell is going on there? Because
what's going on is they're trying to trade him and nobody wants him. That seems to be the word out of Chicago.
Yeah, so how much are they willing to just let him go for? I mean, you have to make sure the salaries match, but when it comes to trying to get the player back that you also want, when you give up something like that, you want some young players back. There seems to be no takers that are just going to do that for Zach LaVine, but he seems like the other obvious one as we talk about it, that at least the conversations are going to be there, whether it happens or not. As things didn't work out for the Golden State Warriors for Lauri Markkanen, we've already seen reports of, well, maybe they start to pivot to Brandon Ingram and Zach LaVine. And so with that, they don't want to give up. How do you say his name? Brandon Pods? I don't know how you say his name.
Just call him Pods.
We'll call him Pods. And they don't want to give up Jonathan Kuminga. So if they're not going to give up those two, how are you going to get Zach LaVine or Brandon Ingram to go to the Golden State Warriors?
I think they would give up Kuminga, and I think for the purposes of our discussion,
you do think they would?
I think in the right deal they would. I think that from what I could tell,
he would be the right deal. Personally,
from what I could tell, they were going to give up Kuminga to get Markkanen. I think that just came down to some of the other stuff that Danny Ainge was holding a high line on. just Kuminga is not going to get it done, right? That seemed to be the message that was coming out of Utah. And all of us know, most of the listeners know, how Danny Ainge negotiates in trade discussions. It's asking for the sun, moon, and the stars.
I just don't see him doing it for LaVine, though.
Not for LaVine, no.
For Markkanen, that's one thing.
But I do think, I honestly think, like, if we're talking about, if there's an ascending player that maybe the Sixers can get, Kuminga might be it, because I do think he's been in enough rumors and it has sounded like they're open-ish to moving him, that I think as part of a multi-team deal, if there's a team that's trying to strip it down, let's say Atlanta, but they don't really want Trae Young. So maybe that's a bad example. Just theoretical team as moving a star.
Yep.
The Golden State Warriors want that star. They move Kuminga. Kuminga goes to the Sixers. The Sixers send picks to the rebuilding team. It could work in some way. And I do think if you're looking for that type of player, like just add another younger, can grow into a role, obviously has like a decent amount of defensive versatility already while he's trying to still figure out kind of what his offensive role and ceiling is. I don't know that he'd be a great fit here. I just think that he's gettable. And I think there was some stuff floating out there when the Warriors and Jazz were in talks that Utah was trying to figure out, where does Kuminga go? Because he doesn't really make sense with
what they
were trying to do.
Other report that people were asking, who was that other guy that was kind of late without saying any names, and you mentioned, well, as far as salary goes, the Kuminga name fits what that conversation was about.
So there's a whole bunch of questions. First, does Golden State have any interest in paying him the extension? If not, it makes sense to get value for him, whether that is value now or value at the deadline. You would think he would be moved. So I think, watching the next month, seeing if he gets that extension will be a key tell. But in terms of the Sixers, Kyle brought it up. Getting a player on a, rookie scale deal who's going to get a new contract is one way to add long-term salary to this team without hard capping you in any way. So you take that $10 million or the $8 million KJ trade exception, basically the human trade exception. You turn that into an $8 million contract now, but a contract who's going to be paid significantly more going forward. It's a way to, like I said, add salary, and more specifically, add a player who is worth his salary without having to hard cap you with the limited resources you have in front of you. So I think looking at players on rookie scale deals makes a lot of sense. The question is, one, do you have anything Golden State is interested in? And maybe they're just looking at it like, hey, we need to be ready for the next star at the deadline. Give us a couple picks. Maybe that's more tradable, or at least has broader appeal than a young player. I'm not sure if that would actually happen. I think Kuminga has pretty broad appeal, but the prospect of that next contract I think different teams could evaluate that next contract differently. And that's the other question from the Sixers perspective. You can't really have a wing who doesn't shoot. So how much do you believe in Kuminga developing that shot? He's still only 21. He had 1 year, I think he shot decently from three.
37-ish, I think, his sophomore year.
For the most part, like if you put him in a playoff game right now, teams are going to help off him a lot.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Do you believe that he can grow into something more and be worth the contract? Because he's probably going to get a pretty good contract even without that shot, because he has so many other physical tools and he can do so much defensively, and he's so young, and somebody is probably going to believe in that shot enough to give him a big deal. Do you, the team trading for him, believe in enough that you think that deal is going to be good too? And it's hard to say because we don't know the Sixers evaluation, but I think that mentality of looking for a player on his rookie deal who's going to get an extension is the right one to have. And when you start looking down that list, there's only so many, and Kuminga's one that naturally fits.
Fast forward, Sixers in the top 3 in February at the trade deadline. We mentioned Bogdanovich and Kuminga as 2 names in the discussion. Who would you prefer?
Probably, if we're strictly saying you're going for the title,
they're in top 3.
It's got to be Bogdanovich because he's the guy that I think
is ready
to play in those type of games. To Derek's point, I really worry about the shot with Kuminga. Now, the flip side of it is he's worlds better as a defender, at least like defensive upside. He has his moments, as do all players around his age, 21, 22, where a little bit of a headless chicken type of guy, but has already shown he can be a good defensive player at this stage. It's the rest of it you have to figure out, right? Like his volume scoring last year was good. And I think the thing that I was impressed by when I watched the Warriors play last year was being able to find his offense without needing to really dominate the ball, like using the attention that Steph Curry draws out to him, that Klay Thompson, even in his present state, is able to draw out to him, and slide into space as a cutter and score as an athlete in transition and do those types of things. I will always like having those types of guys on the team. It is just harder playing off of Joel Embiid and using the space that's there as a non-shooter than it is when Steph Curry is the foundational player of the team. So if it was a different team, I might prefer Kuminga, especially as a long-term bet. I think certainly as a long-term bet. But if you're saying we're trying to win the title this year and next, it's got to be Bogdanovich, I think.
I do think, real quick, because I know we got to pay some bills, I do think this conversation changes a little bit when we get the trade deadline, because at that point you have to use that KJ contract. It's pretty much, you're done at that point. So you look at all your options. Then my sort of threshold to make a move drops a little bit, because it would be good, even if you might not necessarily think he's going to contribute now, because teams can help off him so much in the playoffs, just to get an infusion of youth and talent and someone you can build. It's going to be real hard to get that type of player. So I can talk myself into a Kuminga trade at the deadline that might be a little bit, you're not comfortable with the price, because you feel confident he's going to contribute now. But if that's my best option, I can talk myself into it, like I said, just because I think you need an infusion of youth and someone to grow in the future.
Youth, athleticism, the fact that when you talk about the spacing, he's used to playing now with somebody that creates a lot of space, which is Steph Curry. It looks different, but Joel's going to draw that double team. So as long as he does what he's supposed to do with the cutting, Tyrese Maxey improves what we talk about the playmaking and finding a player like him. That's a lob threat also along the baseline. You help out with him in the lineup with Paul George, and you're talking about a pretty good defensive lineup with Paul George, Kuminga on the wings, with Joel Embiid on the back end.
It gives you a lot of options.
Yeah, he really does, man. And that would be really, really enticing if we get to that spot in February. They're running and gunning for that championship, and that guy is available, and you can just talk yourself into seeing that type of player fit right into what the 76ers are doing at that point. What we have to do right now is take a quick break, come right back, because we have more names to throw out there of possible trade candidates. We'll do that when we get back right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast, as I throw a lob right now to Kyle Neubeck.
You know who throws us lobs all the time?
I throw a pretty decent lob.
Our friends at Coors Light.
I'll say that.
At your height, you had to be able to throw a lob.
Hey, as long as you keep it upright, you can lob me a Coors Light anytime.
Absolutely.
That setup works. Guys, from the day-to-day annoyances to the big stuff, it is easy to get worked up, but you know, as well as I do, there is always a better way, a chiller way. Choose chill, and then choose an ice-cold Coors Light, and you know you're getting an ice-cold Coors Light when the mountains turn blue on the bottles and cans, right as they hit that perfect temperature. I got a few in my refrigerator right now left over from some, we'll call them weekend activities, right? Yeah. So few chilling in there. They are some nice blue mountains sitting on those cans. And guys, look, this part of the offseason might not be stressful for you. You're all feeling happy. You're going into the season. It's stressful for us. We're like, what the heck are we going to talk about every day? The Sixers don't play for another month and a half, but we come in, we have a conversation.
Jonathan Kuminga.
We play a few too many games of pop a shot in there, and then we step back, we choose chill. And I know after the show is done, I can go home, have a nice dinner, finish it off with a nice cold layered, cold filtered, mountain cold refreshment choice. That is Coors Light. So when you choose to rise above it all, I want you to choose chill and choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
And as football season is about to get underway, you see a lot of FOCO type of little guys and little statues behind us and all the other things that we have going on right here on the shelf. And if you need to get prepared for the football season, winding into the latter part of the baseball season as well, getting ready for the Flyers and the Sixers as well, we have our good friends from FOCO as a leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, and much, much more, including the novelty items. Best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms. If you go into a basketball or hockey game in the fall, you want to make sure you show your love with your friendship beaded bracelets as you all get together as a group and head down to the game. So when you do that, whether it's a hoodie or a jacket to go along with the friendship bracelets, beachwear, or even the overalls, there's something for everyone on all occasions with FOCO. And they have you hooked up PHLY and provide us with these awesome set pieces behind us. And they want to do the same for you. FOCO always has our back for Philly sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in the description for all non-presale items. Use the promo code PHLY10, and that's for 10% off.
I think to put a bow on the Bogdanovich Kuminga thing, I think if they had the option to get either, it's a good problem to have, right? Like if you could guarantee right now they acquire one of those guys, that's a lights out pre-deadline period.
The discussion we're having now is sort of like the discussion we were having in February about the cap space plan. You don't know which one you're going to be able to get. You might not be able to get any of them, but the odds of like, oh, we have 4 of these stars available, let's choose which one we like the best, probably not realistic. You take whichever one becomes available. That became Paul George. This is sort of the same. Like, we can sit here and debate Bogdanovich versus Kuminga versus some of the other people we will bring up. The reality is there might only become one that you actually have a chance to acquire, and you end up not having to really be all that picky because your options are limited.
All right, so who do we have for another one that you might have up in the air floating out there just in case?
I mean, the weird thing is, I think with the Knicks going all in on family member, friend of the show, they have been taken off the board for the guy who was the rumored big name, which was Karl Anthony Towns, right? And I think on the other side of it, Minnesota was so good last season, and they figured out that double big front court in a way that they've kind of been taken out of the theoretical trade rumor sweepstakes. Now, the only caveat I would add to that is that this ownership battle that is going on there in Minnesota, I don't know if that will impact this at all.
One of the wildest scenarios I've ever seen.
It just seems to me like Glenn Taylor got cold feet and didn't want to sell the team once they were very good again. Right? And
did you see Alex Rodriguez at the game yesterday?
I did not.
He was at the game yesterday watching Anthony Edwards play. Yeah.
Listen, that contingent certainly seems like they're going to win. But so I still would keep an eye on Karl Anthony Towns, because I don't think Gobert is going to certainly not going to command the same return that they traded for him. And I think that franchise will move heaven and earth to put whatever they think is the best possible team around Anthony Edwards if it ends up that Cat is the guy who's got to go. I'm not saying that's this year. That my prediction was he was going to get moved last year, and then they had one of their best seasons ever. So I'm not really sure where the next natural... I think you have to start going down the pecking order. I think you have to start looking at, the Kuzmas of the world. Like, he's a guy that I think will be, unless the Wizards magically get good in the next 6 months, which I'm not betting on that. I think Kuzma will be a name that gets tossed around a ton. He's out of the Sixers price range, I believe, for any kind of reasonable deal. So that'll be elsewhere.
Well, as you bring up the Knicks, though, when you went to Towns angle, I thought you were going to try to kind of pivot it into the Julius Randle conversation, just because
I guess that's probably a fair point.
That's just the wonder and the concern of where does he fit? Does he fit? And with what everything that they're doing now, as a scorer, he certainly does. He was the second leading scorer on that team, and he was really good before he went down with that injury. And you have so many different types of pieces around both he and Jalen Brunson that you would think that the scoring does fit, and it may fit just as good, if not better, than the Towns, because you have Mitchell Robinson on the floor. So how would that work? But if they do decide that eventually they find a better spot for someone else within what they want to do offensively for Tom Thibodeau's team, Julius Randle's name has been tossed around quite a bit, and I think he is again eligible for another extension because he keeps signing these short.
1 year. There's an option for next year, but I forget what it is.
Yeah, he keeps signing these short, like 3-year deals, and then he's able quicker for an extension. But Julius Randle is a name that I at least had on the list as you bring that up.
Yeah, and again, another player that would be out of the Sixers price range. You have no way to match salary unless your suggestion is to trade Paul George. I don't think anyone is making that suggestion. Julius Randle is making about $28 million, so the Sixers will not be able to match it. But the ripple down effects of that trade would be something the Sixers could
Did you ever looking at him as a player once he really started to turn into this offensive player? Did you ever look at him as a player who could slide right in next to Embiid in that front court?
I was never a big Julius Randle fan. The combination of the defense and the fact that he needs to dominate the ball so much to get his points. I was never a fan necessarily of the player at large, but the fit next to Embiid either.
The other guy, I already mentioned one of the Wizards. I completely forgot that he was there now as a result of the Denny trade. Malcolm Brogdon will be a guy that will be in 100 trade rumors between now and February.
That one still hurts. The Denny one still hurts because he would be like the perfect fit.
Yes. So Brogdon's on and expiring. I think he's beyond the Sixers' real capability. He's at $22.5 million. So unless they would have to package like real rotation guys in order to get him. I don't see that happening. But I think a team that perhaps is in need of extra ball handling, secondary creation, a little bit of 3-point shooting, some defense at times, although I think he's gotten a good bit worse there over the past couple of years. I think Brogdon will be a guy who'll be talked about quite a bit between now and the deadline.
All right, as we are starting to get close to the end of the show, I wanted to stay on one team, two players. One name that keeps coming up in our chat as a rookie name for an extension, though, Tari Eason. We've talked about him in the past. And then also his teammate, which while he had a great second half of the season, it still seems like there's some whispers of Jalen Green not being long for Houston for as long as many thought he would be as the face of that franchise. So, Kyle, just Tari Eason and maybe even Jalen Green, just discussing the two of those as two names that could potentially be on the move. And Tari Eason in the case of, while the offense may not be there, the ruggedness, the toughness, the things that we talk about, the rebounding at the power forward spot and on the rookie deal in regards to the Philadelphia 76ers.
So Jalen Green is the bigger, better talent, right? But I don't think I still think he's years away from being an actualized version of the player he clearly wants to be, shot creator wise. And so even though I think Tari is a lot rawer, right? A lot more question marks on offense. I think if you're trading for one of these types of guys where, at least from the Sixers perspective, if you're trading for one of these guys to be a dirty work, off the bench, change of pace type of player, Tari is like way, way, way out ahead of Jalen in terms of just, he's going to come in, play like he shot out of a cannon, rebound the ball, defend hard, probably do some wild like B-ball Paul adjacent type stuff from time to time, although not quite as often. But he's someone that I could see fitting into that type of energy role off the bench. And then you slowly bring him along and kind of see what he turns into over time. I like Jalen Green, right? Like I at least like reasonably well, because he's got some live dribble juice. He's somebody who can create his own shot. When he gets going, he's like you said, second half of the season had a really good second half and goes from a guy that maybe they're really looking onward from to, okay, now it's back in that kind of 50-50. Are we building with this guy?
Can he stay next to Fred VanVleet?
Does he fit next to this guy?
Right.
So, and that's been the problem with Jalen Green. So I think weirdly, Tari Eason is more of a, you kind of know what you're getting. That ceiling will not be as high, right? Because he is not ever going to be a shot creating player. But I don't think they need those types of players, right? Like they have Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Paul George. They have a couple backup ball handlers. They have Reggie Jackson. They have older Kyle Lowry. You don't need a lot of guys who are just like, give them the ball and they go get their own offense, right? I think he's much more valuable league-wide at the moment. But I think Eason would make more sense here, even though I think he's got a long way to go to be a reliable rotation guy.
Yeah. And obviously, another key part of this, I just think it would cost significantly less to acquire Tari Eason than it would Jalen. Look, great to have a guy, 6'8", incredible athlete, can help you on the glass, can provide some weak side shot blocking. The question is obviously the shot. He attempted, not
or just like any of the
offensive skills that don't
Yeah.
involve cutting, offensive rebounding, or getting out in transition. Sure. If he can't, functionally use his athleticism to create it, he doesn't offer much offensively. The shot's a big one. Like, he attempted just one catch and shoot shot per game last year. That's not makes. That's just attempting. It was a very infrequent scenario where he would actually make a catch and shoot shot. I actually think the percentages were pretty good, but we're talking about like 20 makes all year. It doesn't really matter. I don't care what the percentages are. That shot is going to be a big question, but he does know how to impact the game without having the ball in his hands. Like, he's a good offensive rebounder. He makes those cuts. He gets out in transition. Certainly gives you that, uses his athleticism and size defensively. And that's just an archetype the Sixers don't really have, especially when you're talking about a power forward. To have a bigger, more physical, more athletically imposing option would be nice. Are you going to give up the farm? No, but I think he's going to be cheaper, in part because Houston just has a lot of depth, a lot of depth at his position and in the front court, and a lot of depth just with young players in general. They're not going to want to give extensions to all of them. So I think he's probably a more realistic option than maybe some of the other ones we're talking about.
Yeah, popular name there in the chat. So I wanted to make sure we brought it up, give people an opportunity. Dorian Finney-Smith is another one that we've talked a ton about, but a name that you brought up, mentioned earlier.
That'll be, we'll get it. We'll have plenty more Dorian Finney-Smith combos between now and
as
February,
long as he's not moved now, we're going to talk about him at some point later on in the season, once the season gets underway. Any super chat? Yeah, they're the super chats that we have. We have real time with Prince Blue, and it says, broke my heart, Fredo, quote unquote, for Kyle team boneless wings, end quote.
People got very mad or offered a lot of support about my. To be clear,
is this the back and forth between you two
on Twitter? Yes.
Yeah.
The tweet was, "What's your most boomer stance?" And this is my boomer stance. You call boneless wings what they are, which is nuggets. That's what they are.
I'm with you real time, and I just had no energy to go back and forth and inject myself into that conversation. We could do that on the show.
On something like that, I'm mostly just screwing around on Twitter. I don't really care about boneless wings. And I care because I enjoy them. I don't really have a strong take on the naming conventions, but it's fun to, screw around on Twitter.
It's always a fun conversation. Yeah. It really is. And guess what? Order us some and we'll eat those wings.
Hey, you ship them.
I'll still eat them. I just won't call them wings.
Right here on the show, man. Who else do we have here?
Ja
Pedro says, some mixed feelings watching USA versus Brazil yesterday. Love my country, but I couldn't hold my smiles every time Embiid shut those French fans up. That was going to be the final part of our show here in this final block, which was, Kyle, you were giving us a little bit of play-by-play. Some of the others in the chat were doing so yesterday also while we were wrapping up our show. And Joel looked really good in the first half, did not play in the second half. They said it was because of his ankle, but the game was
a mildly sprained ankle.
The game was out of reach. He didn't have to play anyway. Bam Adebayo got the start in the second half. He looked good yesterday.
Yes.
He looked real good yesterday. Yeah.
I think, and we got a lot into his conditioning and whatnot yesterday. To me, the more important thing than he hit a bunch of shots, which that was
3 for 3 from 3.
Everyone was loving, Joel's hitting threes, and that's what people focus on. What jumped out to me, they let him or asked him to switch more on defense, and Joel got in a stance and was chasing guys around, and without making plays at the rim, which he still made those, and I thought he was a more active, engaged rebounder than he had been in previous games. I thought seeing him get down, drop his hips, slide his feet, do all that to me was the biggest deal of that game. Just seeing him move laterally in ways that I didn't think he had before. Did guys score on him occasionally in space? Sure. But they were taking, excuse me, they're taking some like 16 to 18 foot floaters. It's like, if a guy's going to hit that shot, defenses are designed to concede that shot now. And so to watch Joel lock some guys down, rebound the ball, and then add some points on the other end of the floor that were the icing on the cake, that's what I wanted to see from Joel, is all the defensive work, all the mobility we saw yesterday. That was good stuff. I would have loved to see him in the second half, to see him, really pour it on these guys.
Keep going,
but obviously, better safe than sorry if he had any kind of little ankle knock that he was dealing with.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, it is, we mentioned this the other day when we were talking about Team USA. When the big man switching, it's almost impossible. Outside of picking on Curry, it's almost impossible for teams to score on him. So seeing Joel do that, first of all, it helped Team USA, but also helped alleviate some of our concerns. I said yesterday, I don't really, as long as they win a gold medal, because like I said, I don't want to deal with the controversy of the Sixers being at the center of another Team USA team coming up short. I lived through that once, don't need it a second time. Outside of that, as long as Joel Embiid starts moving better and starts looking like he's progressing toward the player that you normally see in like January, I don't really care if he makes shots. I don't really care too much how much success he has. I don't care about the narrative. I can tune that out. The fact that he was switching on the perimeter was also my number one takeaway by a long shot. And I agree with Kyle, the work on the glass, when Joel Embiid's tired and or not getting good lift, it shows up on the defensive glass first.
Yes.
And seeing that was certainly a little bit reassuring.
And that one sequence that he had where he defended 2 players on the perimeter, forced another pass to a smaller guard in the paint. He had to take a fadeaway in the middle of the lane, and Joel at least recovered enough to defend it, force him to miss that shot. That was one sequence that really stood out.
Was that the one where right after, and I'm glad Dwayne Wade pointed this out, he ran the floor and posted somebody that threw him the ball, got knocked out of bounds, and Dwayne Wade's like, you got to give the big man the ball after he defends like that. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is the type of thing that I think gets lost so much with the way the league has gone, right? It's very perimeter based. You don't have a lot of guys like Joel in the league. There are a lot of guys who have never played with someone like that who would just like, oh, yeah, he did his job. And no, feed the big guy when he has possessions like that. I hope that they put that on the wall or in a film session at a Sixers practice and say, this is what happens when Joel defends. Give that guy the damn ball. Love that. And I'm glad that Dwayne Wade was able to highlight that on the broadcast yesterday.
So that's at least 2 wins for them to set up where Embiid has played. He played decently enough to help him to win the other day on Saturday, and he was really good in the first half to contribute to the win on Tuesday. He was
their best player in the first half, I think, yesterday. At least one of them. Yeah,
he and LeBron. And now we set up for the semifinals, another game against Serbia. And they've had their way against Serbia, but this is now in the semifinal round.
Yeah, and look, I feel confident in Team USA winning. I mean, they're Team USA. You should feel confident in them
Serbia
winning.
had to turn the game around. What was it, 27-point disadvantage that they were on? Yeah.
But, like, if you're worried about the narrative and people outside of the city, like if Joel Embiid struggles even a tiny bit and Team USA wins by 20 points, the internet's going to lose their mind because it's Embiid and Jokic and all that stuff. And like I said, I don't really care. I can shut down Twitter, but get ready for it. Like, I hope he has a good game just for my mentions.
Yep, absolutely. So it should be a good one tomorrow against Nikola Jokic. But, again, around that team, man, they really, USA is a better team.
They do.
They should, just like we saw in the 2 games before, they should do it again in this game upcoming tomorrow. Kevin Durant also broke the record for Team USA scoring in the USA basketball play. Lisa Leslie, he surpassed her by 1 point, I believe it was, 471 to 470. So he is now the all-time leading scorer. And then they just put up this dope picture yesterday of them all sitting on the step. Did you see it? That was really cool.
I saw Joel sitting with LeBron, Steph, and KD up near the top. And I was like, maybe there really is something to that Steve Kerr trio that he wants them to stay together. Clearly, I mean, Joel and Steph go back a while because of the Under Armour connection and all of that. But yeah, it's cool to see Joel with all these guys. It was cool to see Kevin Durant, able to take that record because, frankly, he only just took the men's scoring record from Melo. I think it was last Olympics, I want to say, or last tournament.
When he was the headline of that team.
Yes. Yeah. So good for Kevin Durant. Reminder that he has had an illustrious career, even though I'm a hater of those rings that he got in Golden State.
Again, another discussion for another day that we will have while
I feel like we've been teasing that discussion like for
Kevin
almost
Durant.
A year straight.
Well, you could probably do it after the Olympics.
Listen, one of these days you guys are going to show up and the headline of the show will be, do Kevin Durant's rings count?
And he's going to tweet at us during the show.
Devon's going to have steam coming out of his ears because I'm so mad about that
And
topic.
I'm going to hit this bell, and Kevin Durant's just going to magically appear and join in on the show and get in on the discussion because it's going to be that fun. But no, great player. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the photo itself, just good to see Embiid in the mix with all of those guys as they
like genuine legends of the game.
Yeah, and like we said in the beginning, when everything was getting underway, he belongs in this group. Whether he felt he should have played for France or Cameroon or Team USA, he definitely belongs in the mix with those players as they take this photo. It's a really cool photo that they have, and it's gonna be a big game tomorrow. So we'll have to figure out how we're gonna pay attention to it tomorrow during the show, as it tips off literally when we start the show tomorrow. But
I feel like every game has tipped off when we start the show.
And as we get underway, we got to say thanks to everybody. Of course, make sure you sign up for the Die Hard program, and when you do that, you'll get access to a lot of great things from the writing from these guys, the Eagles, Phillies, Flyers as well, merchandise, the PHLY Lounge, and the Discord, all of it available to you. And yes, the games do always start when we are on the air.
I think 3 of them have legitimately started while we've just started the show.
All right, it's time for a roll call as we wrap things up on this dreary and rainy Wednesday again.
I'm sick of this rain, man, but I am not sick of shouting out our people who show up for us every day, including, by the way, my girl Winona.
Hey, Nona.
Winona, I hope you're keeping track. I don't think I said any curse words today after you requested. You know that's a very difficult task for me. So hopefully you and your wonderful mother were able to enjoy the show, have a nice PG listening afternoon down there in Florida.
Tell Mom we said hello.
Thank you for being here still, even though you're on vacation hanging out with Mom. Thank you to Jeffrey Stewart. Thank you to Money Mar, Eugene Ross.
What up, Gene?
Rick Morse, Provolone John, Prophet One.
Prophet One was happening.
Jess with the Purple Heart.
Hey, Jess.
Martian Lynch, 33.
What up, Martian?
Dave Dewar.
What is
Val
Dave doing?
Host. Val, do we have the matching shirts again today or not so much?
Oh, we got to get Val more shirts.
We had Mango Gango.
Mango
in here
Gango
today.
said he has been here in a while, and this is the first time catching us live in the bits. We appreciate it, Mango
thank
Gango.
you, Mango.
What up, Mango?
Say hello to the Gango for me. Igavini in the building today.
Yes.
Our guy Al, the 2-minute warning
What
is
up, Al?
here. Bootzilla.
Boots.
Ramid
What's
checking
up, man?
in. Jay checking in. I think was our first commenter today. So
Jay?
shout out to Jay.
What up, Jay?
For coming through strong and staying here to the very end. Phi Chi, thank you for being here. LUV
The DJ? All right.
Love DJ, maybe?
I guess so.
Maybe that's
What
it.
up, DJ?
What up to Mark? Just Mark?
Just Mark. That's always a good
Just
name.
Mark.
Just Mark.
Greg still in the house. Real time in the house. João Pedro in the house, also with the super chat. James
Conflicted.
McGlone also here.
Oh.
Thank you to every single
What
one
up,
of you.
James?
Drowning Guitars. Randy Rubart also in the building today.
What up, Randy?
Thank you to each and every one of you who were here. If you could, on the way out, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications each and every time we go live. If you hit the thumbs up button, that will serve as a good luck wish to Joel Embiid and Team USA in tomorrow's semifinal
Watch
clash
it with us.
with that bozo Nikola Jokic. We will see you tomorrow
Watch
at 3
it with
o'clock.
us.
We'll be watching. We'll be hanging out.
Somehow.
Hopefully you will too. Goodbye, everyone. And thank you to super producer Bree.
See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.